The Indian River Lagoon is a diverse waterway extending over 156 miles up Florida's Atlantic coastline and comprises three bodies of water: the Mosquito Lagoon, Banana River, and the Indian River. Despite their names, these bodies of water are not, in fact, rivers, as their flow relies on wind and tidal currents, and they have no headwaters or mouths. Rather, the Indian River Lagoon is an estuary, and its combination of ocean saltwater and fresh water forms brackish, slightly salty water that is able to support a wealth of biodiversity. The lagoon is home to over 4,300 species of plants and animals, 50 of which are endangered or threatened, and is one of the most biodiverse estuaries in the northern hemisphere. Included in these species are alligators, bottlenose dolphins, manatees, green sea turtles, and loggerhead sea turtles. There is also a wide variety of avian species that live on the lagoon, such as blue heron, roseate spoonbills, snowy egrets, and osprey. Bivalve species such as clams, oysters, and mussels support the ecosystem by naturally filtering the water, as well as being a food source for other lagoon species. The Indian River Lagoon is also a seagrass-based ecosystem in which the seagrass provides a nursery for juvenile fish, a habitat for other small creatures such as shrimp, and a staple food for manatees. The seagrasses also add dissolved oxygen into the water for lagoon animals to breathe. In recent years, a series of devastating algae blooms have caused over 90% of seagrass to be lost in some parts of the lagoon, which has led to population decline for many species in the Indian River Lagoon. This issue has led Brevard Zoo's Restore Our Shores conservation team to set up a seagrass restoration project alongside their existing restoration efforts.
So these large algae blooms that we have more frequently now last for a very long time, and unfortunately have clouded out most of our seagrass beds that once called the lagoon home. This is really a seagrass-based ecosystem. In some parts of the lagoon, we've lost over 90% of seagrass coverage since our first super bloom in 2011, which was a large brown tide event.
The loss of seagrass has had devastating effects for the lagoon ecosystem, as it has caused a loss of habitat, food, and oxygen within the lagoon.
So without that seagrass species, we're losing a lot of our sports fish. So a lot of redfish, snook populations, and as well as just some little creatures that people don't necessarily think about all the time. So we haven't seen many seahorses here anymore, and there's so many other species of fish that we don't necessarily catch for commercial purposes, but they use that seagrass as habitat. A lot of different gastropod species, as well as just mollusca in general, have kind of disappeared from this portion of the lagoon because their habitat is gone.
The loss of seagrass also affects the larger inhabitants of the lagoon, including Florida's state mammal and reptile, the manatee and the alligator.
There are also a lot of megafauna that actually benefit from seagrass. Manatees and sea turtles both eat it, and then alligators actually use it for hunting ground. It is a very important species to have gone from the lagoon, so that's why we're trying to get it back.
Another species of particular importance for the lagoon is oysters, which support not only the ecosystem, but also local fishing industries.
So oysters are a keystone species. Not only do they provide filtration for the lagoon and eat algae, which we have an excess of because of the nutrient pollution, they actually provide habitat. So as a gregarious species, or a species that likes to grow and be together, they actually form what we call reefs. So an oyster lands on another oyster and creates a big structure, which actually is habitat for quite a few fish species, like gobies and blennies, and then quite a few different crustacean species. So stone crab, blue crab, as well as mud crab and porcelain crabs. We really need to support that oyster species because they support quite a few fishing industries here.
Another issue that significantly impacts the lagoon is poor water quality. This in turn causes a population decrease in organisms that use the water column to spawn and move as larvae, such as oysters and clams that are vital for lagoon filtration.
Poor water quality also really impacts fish populations, and as you get up the trophic levels, we see really high levels of pollutants in our mammalian species here, so in manatees and dolphins, and then also in our hunting birds like ospreys. It's a never-ending spiral when it comes to moving up the trophic levels and getting into those higher level species that are getting to the point where they have high levels of pollutants, and it's affecting their ability to repopulate.
One of the species most shockingly affected by poor water quality in the lagoon is the green sea turtle, which is susceptible to developing fibropapillomatosis, or FP, as a result.
So there's a virus that's actually a herpes virus called FP, and it is present in sea turtles that have come into the lagoon, and we end up rescuing them, and they have large growths on them, just like as a herpes virus would in humans, but they tend to get very large. And then once the sea turtles are introduced to better water quality, the growths start to go away. So we know that there is a correlation between the poor water quality and the FP virus in sea turtles, but we don't necessarily know everything about it yet, but we're working on it. But that's another impact of poor water quality here in the Indian River Lagoon.
Despite all of these threats, all hope is not lost for the Indian River Lagoon, as Restore Our Shores, amongst other projects, have been working to restore biodiversity and lagoon health. In 2020, Restore Our Shores began planting seagrass beds in the lagoon to rebound from the enormous amount that was lost as a result of algae blooms.
A lot of the way seagrass actually recruits in the Indian River Lagoon is through fragments. So fragments of seagrass can actually float through the water column for up to 2 weeks, even longer, and they photosynthesize while just floating in the water. So the way we would actually make a planting unit is we would take a stake. This was a planting unit, it's looking a little rough now, but we'd take a stake like this and 12 to 15 shoots of seagrass, and we would actually use ceramic plated gardening wire, so there's no plastic, wrap it around the stake, and then the planting units just go straight into the ground like that after we dig up a little bit of sand, cover up the rhizome, so the white part, and then we leave it. And that's a planting unit, and that's how we've been planting our project.
Another of the organisation's missions is to restore the oyster populations of the Indian River Lagoon. So for the past decade, Restore Our Shores have organised a variety of oyster restoration projects throughout the Brevard County area. One of their most recent initiatives has been to construct reefs using metal cages called gabions, rather than the more commonly used plastic mesh bags, with great success.
This is an oyster habitat, so in order to help support our oyster populations, we have actually created a program where homeowners are able to come and get trained, and then we will distribute spat, so baby oysters, to them on a shell that is blank. So we'll actually take and harvest oysters from the Indian River Lagoon, bring them down to FAU, give them blank shell. They will spawn the oysters that we give them onto the blank shell, and then we give baby oysters to homeowners to grow off their dock. So this has been here probably 9 months or so, and so the oysters are very big, so I'm going to pull some out. They're very sharp, so I'm going to be very careful, but this is a cluster of oysters. I would predict that we have over 200 oysters here in this habitat. And what we do with these is, after we create oyster reef, in certain areas there's not a huge amount of oyster larvae in the water column. And that's due to causeways and river flow just not being great. So we built these bridges that essentially have segmented the river, so it really doesn't help larvae get in between basins. And so we're gonna speed up the process by putting some live oysters on our oyster reefs.
The restoration work carried out by Restore Our Shores staff is supported by thousands of volunteers that aid them with things such as helping to make supplies, allowing oyster reefs or seagrass beds to be built in front of their property, and assisting with their monitoring.
The community here in Brevard County and surrounding counties is amazing. There's a huge amount of support from the community, and we couldn't do what we do without volunteers. We are a staff of right now 9, so without all these lovely people that come out and help us every single time we go out, we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
We're a relatively small team, and we have 156 miles of lagoon to cover with these projects. So we're extremely thankful for all the help from volunteers and even other partner organizations that help with these projects, help provide muscle, even just their time to help sort through oysters. We've had very many volunteers who become our monitoring specialists, and they're just as good at identifying these different species as we are, sometimes a little bit better. So there's always help that we can get from somebody.
The Restore Our Shores volunteers are passionate about protecting and restoring their local environment, both for the local wildlife and their community.
The Indian River Lagoon went through a traumatic experience in about 2011, where it resulted in the loss of 90% of the seagrasses within the northern part of the lagoon, north of Sebastian Inlet up to the Titusville area. And as a result, it's an opportunity to look at the restoration of the lagoon. And really, part of the reason for moving from the Jacksonville area, where we were living at the time, down to here was to become part of that as I retired. and I'm still in the process of retiring, but you know, it's a big part of what I want to do for now and into the future. And I've just learned that you've got to get on the ground and start moving, you know, and that's what the Restore Our Shores is doing.
Living on the water and enjoying all the living things in it, we had a chance to volunteer our property for a clam project that would siphon the water, keep it cleaner, maybe multiply and get more generations, because lately the water quality has diminished extensively for the usual reasons: fertilizer, overdevelopment, and misuse. And I want to make a difference, even if it's my little piece of the world. And we've had some significant success, I think. I love it. It's more than a hobby for me. It's a passion. The more energy you get behind this for people to take care of their properties, which takes care of the lagoon, maybe we'll have some success. So I can't thank them enough for what they've shown me. And all the older neighbors show me, there was seahorses here. There was all kinds of beautiful things, turtles and stuff, and nobody's seen them in quite some time. So maybe they'll come to my little part of the world first.
The work of Restore Our Shores staff and volunteers is far from over, but it is testament to the importance and effectiveness of collaborations between scientists and their local community, particularly for wildlife conservation and restoration projects.